What's going on, guys? I don't know why it appears that I'm not there. Oh, it's just the lag. I was like, oh my God, I'm invisible. Welcoming myself back to our secret streams because I missed last week due to being deep in the jungle. It was necessary, had to do it. And so I hope you guys you got to check out the alien contact stream that I just did. That experience really sort of holds together all of the rest of it somehow. It's almost like the central point of emanation of everything else. So at any rate, we are still dealing with the Kabbalah. Hold on, I got to turn this light on. It's been blinking, and it's really obnoxious, but I can't see without it, so I'm going to have to just hope it doesn't flash. And so this is interesting because we have a whole lot of controversy around the gender issue, which is what we're getting into now. And really incredibly, the Christian right, who is the most up in arms about this, they believe that God made people in their own image. And as it turns out, if it's the God of the Jews that they're worshiping, which, the Old Testament's included in the New Testament, that God is neither male nor female. It is both and neither and one or the other. But it certainly, as we're going to see here, is not designated as any particular sex. The idea that it was a male comes from mistranslations, deliberate mistranslations of the Old Testament. And so he is conformed in three heads, which are but one head, and these three are extended into microprosopus, and from them shines out all that is. Then this wisdom instituted investiture with form, whereby the unmanifested and informous became manifested, putting on form and produced a certain outflow. When this wisdom is thus expanded by flowing forth, then it is called Father of Fathers, the whole universe of things being contained and comprehended in it. This wisdom is the principle of all things, and in it beginning and end are found. The Book of the Abstruse says the Cifra de Zenintha is that which describes the equilibrium of balance. Before the balance was, face did not look toward face. And the commentary on it says, the scales of the balance are designated as male and female. In the spiritual world, evil and good are in equilibrio, and will be restored when of the evil good becomes until all is good. Also, this other world is called the world of the balance. For as in the balance are two scales, one on either side and the beam and needle between them, so too in this world of restoration and numerations are arranged on distinct persons. For Chakma is on the right hand on the side of Gedula, and Bina on the left on the side of Geburah, and Keter is the beam of the balance above them in the middle. So Gedula or Chesed is on one hand and Geburah on the other, and under these Tiferet and Netzach is on one side and Had on the other side, and under those Yesod. The supreme crown, which is the ancient most holy, the most hidden of the hidden, is fashioned within the occult wisdom of both sexes, male and female. This is something that I had kind of forgotten about, but it's an idea that I had in my head for many, many years, that the ultimate object of the universe is transmutation into alchemical gold. And although I do believe that we are trapped in a dualistic creation for the time being, and that if any of the laws are suspended or removed or changed even for a nanosecond, it would dissolve the continuity of existence, and it would be a big problem. And so it's difficult for me to understand how this could happen. But the idea that the carbon and the darkness and all of these things are to be transmuted into the lead of those things to be transmuted into the gold of higher consciousness is, something that I've kind of intuited for many, many years. And it is also worthy of noting that where he said that this realm of restoration, or however he put it, is another, in this world of restoration, that idea that the light descended and became matter, and the process involves the reintegration of that light back into spirit at some point, is another way of saying the lead into gold, or the the eventual transmutation of the world of matter and darkness into the realm of light. And that is also stated with the whole thing of all will be redeemed. But yeah, so those ideas are present here. And then now we're talking about the actual, what is that word for when you're of indeterminate sex? Not hermaphroditic, but androgynous deity. Chakma and Bina, intellect and wisdom. The mother whom it impregnates are quantitatively equal. Wisdom and the mother of intellection go forth at once and dwell together. For when the intellectual power emanates, the productive source of intellection is included. Before Adam Kadmon was fashioned into male and female, and the state of equilibrium introduced, the father and mother did not look each other in the face, for the father denotes most perfect love, and the mother most perfect rigor, and she averted her face. There is no left or female, says the Idra Rabbah in the Ancient and Hidden One, but his totality is right, male. The totality of things is Hua, He, and He is hidden on every side. Macroprosopus, Adam Kadmon, is not so near unto us as to speak to us in the first person, but is designated in the third person, Hua, or He. Also, that is mentioned in the Thoth Tarot deck, where the invocation to place your hand on the deck and to invoke by that name. Of the letters, it said Yod is male, He is female, and Vav is both. And remember that the Tetragrammaton, that symbolizes the deity, is Yod He Vav He. And He is a word that has a standard form and a final form, and then they have different attributions and numerical values if mem or aleph or one of these letters is a final or is at the end. So the yod is male, which is interesting because it looks like a spermatozoa kind of. The He is female, and the Vav is both. In yod are three yods, the upper and lower apex, and Vav in the middle. By the upper apex is denoted the supreme Keter, the crown. By Vav in the middle, Chakma, and by the lower apex, Bina. The Idra Sutta says the universe was outformed in the form of male and female. Wisdom, pregnant with all that is, when it flowed and shone forth, shone altogether under the form of male and female. Chakma is the father, and Bina is the mother. And so the two are in equilibrium as male and female. And for this reason, all things whatsoever are constituted in the form of male and female. And if it were not so, they could not exist. And this is the main reason why people are so out of sync with truth. People tend to either believe in intuition to the exclusion of intellect and reason, and so many people believe that spirituality requires you to abandon reason and critical thinking and scientific process and all of these things in favor of emotion and intuition and feeling in the body and feeling in the heart. But of course, you can just look around the world and you can see how many people are completely at odds with each other, and they feel 100% in their heart that what they know is true. And so obviously this cannot be a correct way of discerning what is true and what is not true, because there are so many people that believe completely different things that are totally convinced that they are correct. And so one of the most important elements of correcting the trajectory of the human race is to abandon this idea of faith in that sense. But at the same time, if you are entirely intellectual and live entirely in your head, and you have nothing of intuition and nothing of emotion, then you're out of balance. And that would be the atheist, liberal, scientific, deterministic. That whole trip is clearly out of balance and out of sync with reality. So in order to arrive at truth, the face of the father must be looking into the face of the mother, and from that, balance is achieved and truth can emerge. In the same way that when these energies from the Sephirah came together and they were able to harmonize and create a third thing, by the combination of two things, a third thing of a higher nature can emerge, or at least a different nature. So the universe was outformed in the form of male and female, wisdom pregnant with all that is, when it flowed and shone forth, shone altogether under the form of male and female. Chakma is the father and Bina is the mother, and so the two are in equilibrium as male and female, and for this reason all things whatsoever are constituted in the form of male and female, and if it were not so, they would not exist. And this is stated again in the Kabbalion, where it is said that gender is in everything. And this is how, or another modality of expression of the idea that all that is metaphor. When we talk about water as emotion and air as intellect, and we attribute those things, the water to the female and the air to the male, and so on and so forth. We have it in language where, in Spanish and Italian and some other languages, there is designations for words for being male and female. And, of course, we have all sorts of associations. And so this is saying that, that is just a fundamental quality, that everything can be attributed generally to one or the other expression. This principle, Chakma, is the generator of all things, and he and Bina conjoin, and she shines within him. When they thus conjoin, she conceives, and the outflow is truth. Yod impregnates the letter He and begets a son, and she, thus pregnant, brings forth. The principle called father, the male or generative principle, is comprehended in Yod, which itself flows downward from the energy of the Absolute Holy One. Yod is the beginning and the end of all things that are. The stream that flows forth is the universe of things, which always becomes, having no cessation. Man, this is really getting old, but this is the only light that I have available to me here, and it just does that every few minutes. Yod is the beginning and end of all things that are. The stream that flows forth is the universe of things, which always becomes, having no cessation. And this becoming world is created by Yod. The Yod includes two letters. All things are included in Yod, wherefore it is called the father of all. All categories, whatever, go forth from Chakma, and in it are contained all things unmanifested. And the aggregate of all things, or the unity in which the many are, and out of which all flow, is the sacred name Yod-He Vod-He. In the view of the Kabbalists, all individuals are contained in species, and all species in genera, and all particulars in a universal. I wonder why it does that. Let's see, I guess I can still read. All in the universal in view are contained in species and blah blah particulars in the universal, which is an idea abstracted from all consideration of individuals, not an aggregate of individuals, but as it were an entity or being, ideal or intellectual, but nonetheless real, prior to any individual, containing them all, and out of which they are all in succession evolved. And this is basically the idea of archetypes, that there are formats to all of the things that exist, and they are based on these certain characteristic components that at the fundamental or most basic level of the constructs of the universe, we find these interposed antinomies. And it is true that for every negatively charged particle, there is a positive particle. And so we see in our sciences that the truth of these ideas, as they were expressed, as male and female, it's all basically been confirmed. And as far as we know, no one had electron microscopes or particle acceleration chambers to do these experiments back then, but yet it was all known. And it really all can be known by observing the macro level, and that will tell you about the micro. And that is kind of a reverse of the process that has allowed the mind to decode beyond the veil and to instruct itself in the characteristics of the consciousness which preceded the creation of the universe, because it is a reflection with the same characteristics and properties. If this discontents you, reflect that, supposing the theory correct, that all was originally in the deity, and that the universe has proceeded forth from deity, and not created by deity out of nothing, the idea of the universe always existing in the deity before its outflow must have been as real as the deity himself. The whole human race, or humanity, for example, existed in the deity, not distinguished into individuals, but as a unit out of which the manifold was to flow. And again, this idea that everything is reflections of this one thing, right? They say that all life on Earth evolved from a single cell, a single organism, that we all have a common ancestor. And so this ancient writing makes it very clear that the many came from one, according to this, ontology or philosophy. So that, there you have it. From the one came the many, and we see this reflection of the non-physical or the spiritual or the energetic in the evolution and development of the universe at large. Everything actual must have been first possible before having actual existence, and this possibility or potentiality was to Kabbalists a real ins. Before the evolvement of the universe, it had to exist potentially, the whole of it, with all of its individuals included in a single unity. This was the idea or plan of the universe, and this had to be formed. It had to emanate from the infinite deity and be of itself, though not its very self. Geburah, severity, the Sephirah opposite to and conjoined sexually with Gedula to produce Tiferet, or harmony and beauty, is also called in the Kabbalah judgment, in which term are included the ideas of limitation and conditioning, which often seems indeed to be its principal sense, while benignity is as often styled infinite. Thus it is obscurely taught that in everything that is, not only the finite but also the infinite is present, and that the rigor of the stern law of limitation, by which everything below or beside the infinite absolute is limited, bounded, and conditioned, tempered and modified by grace, which so relaxes it that the infinite, unlimited, unconditioned is also everywhere present, and that it is thus the spiritual and material natures are in equilibrio, good everywhere counterbalancing evil, light everywhere in equilibrium with darkness, from which again results the universal harmony of things. In the vacant space affected for creation, there at last remained a faint vestige or trace of Ein Sophic light, of the light of the substance of the infinite. Man is thus both human and divine, and the apparent antagonisms in his nature are real equilibrium, if he wills it shall be so, from which results the harmony not only of life and action, but of virtue and perfection. And, this is something that should really be noted here that, in my opinion, one of the great evils of the Abrahamic religions, I guess that's how you say it, you know what I mean, they have separated divinity from creation, and in the Christian and the Muslim sense. And if you suggest that mankind, or man, or any object really is a fragment of the deity, this is considered to be blasphemy. So it's really interesting to see that the religion from whence this stuff grew does not see it that way at all. And the Christians point their finger at this stuff and say that it's evil, which, if you're thinking about it in terms of the redintegration of the concept of divinity into the living, breathing humanity, you're calling that evil. And this idea that you should remove God from the creation, that is good. I think we have some seriously backward shit going on. In the vacant space affected for creation, there at last remained a faint vestige or trace of einsophic light, of the light of the substance of the infinite. Man is thus both human and divine, and the apparent antagonisms in his nature are really equilibrium. To understand the Kabbalistic idea of the Sephirot, it must be borne in mind that they are assigned not only to the worlds of emanation, Atzilut, but also to each other, to each of the other worlds, Braya, Yeserah, and Asaya. Remember, these are the four layers of the soul, or the worlds of the soul. They were not only attributes of the unmanifested deity, but not only himself in limitation, but his actual manifestations or qualities made apparent as modalities. And they were also qualities of the universal nature, spiritual, mental, and material, produced and made existent by the outflow of himself. In the view of the Kabbalah, God and the universe are one, and in the one general, as the type or source, were included and involved. From it have been evolved and issued forth the manifold and all particulars. Where indeed does individuality begin? It is the hidden source and spring alone that is the individual, the unit, or is it the flowing fountain that fills the ocean? Or the ocean itself, or its waves, or the drops, or the vaporous particles that are the individuals. The sea and the river, these are one, but the drops of each are many. The tree is one, but its leaves are a multitude. They drop with the frost and fall upon its roots, but the tree still continues to grow, and new leaves come again in the spring, which are partly materialized from the substance of the leaves that have fallen in the past. Is the human race not the tree, and are not individual men the leaves? How else explain the force of will and sympathy, and the dependence of one man at every instant on his life on all others, except by the oneness of the race? The links that bind all created things together are the links of a single unity, and the whole universe is one, developing itself into the manifold. Obtuse commentators have said that the Kabbalah assigns sexual characteristics to the very deity, and they are offended by this. There is no warrant for such an assertion anywhere in the Zohar or in any commentary upon it. On the contrary, the whole doctrine of the Kabbalah is based on the fundamental proposition that the deity is infinite, everywhere extended, without limitation or determination, and therefore without any conformation whatever, which is a bit odd because he just talked about how there was the sexual interaction of Gedula and Chakma. So why he is denying that after he just explained it is beyond me. In order to commence the process of creation, it was necessary for him, first of all, to effect a vacant space within himself. To this end, the deity, whose nature is approximately expressed by describing him as light, filling all space, formless, limitless, contracts himself on all sides from a point within himself, and thus effects a quasi-vacant space in which only a vestige of his light remains, and into this circular or spherical space he emits his emanations, portions of his lighter nature, and to some of these sexual characteristics are symbolically assigned. The infinite first limits himself by flowing forth in the shape of will, of determination to act. This will of the deity, or the deity as will in Keller, or the crown, the first Sephirah. And this is an important indication or confirmation that our will is sovereign, because the crown, Keter, is the symbol of the will. And so the will is divinely ordained as the preeminent directive, and coming from a man, it is still has its fount in the deity itself. This is also the foundation formula of magical practice. In it are included all other emanations. This is a philosophical necessity. The infinite does not first will and then, as a sequence to or consequence of that determination, not only simultaneous, but the infinite does not will first and then, as a sequence to or consequence of that determination, subsequently perform. To will and to act must be simultaneous, but in reality the same. Nor does he, by his omniscience, learn that a particular action will be wise, and then, in consequence of being so convinced, first determine to do the act and then do it. His wisdom and his will also act simultaneously, and with him to decide that it was wise to create was to create. Thus, his will contains in itself all the Sephirot. And this is something that we actually experience for ourselves when we enter into flow state. And the act is not preceded by a directive from the mind. The things happen spontaneously. They happen instantly. And it is not until that point that is done is well done. Do it 1,000 times, and it is difficult. Do it 1,000 times 1,000, and it is easy. Do it 1,000 times 1,000. It is no longer thee that doeth it, but it that doeth it through thee. And it is not until then that which is done is well done. That is basically a description of flow state, and it is pretty well known, I think, that these tremendous performances and spontaneous innovations are generally achieved when the delay that is created by cognition is taken out of the equation. A lot of musicians, in fact, including myself, will say that when they're improvising, if they think, then there's a mistake. Thus, his will contains in itself all the Sephirot. This will, determining him to the exercise of intellection, to thought, to frame the idea of the universe, caused the power in him to excite the intellectual faculty to exercise, and was that power. Itself, which had flowed forth from Ein Sof as will, now flows forth as the generative power to beget intellectual action in the intellectual faculty or intelligence, Bina. The act itself, the thought, the intellection producing the idea, is Da'at. And as the text of the Sephira de Zenuthia says, the power and faculty, the generative and productive, the active and passive, the will and capacity, which unite to produce the act of reflection or thought or intellection, are always in conjunction. And remember that Da'at is the 11th Sephirot, and 11 is the number of magical expansion, but that it is also an invisible Sephirah that is usually not penciled in, and if it is designated, it's usually designated in a broken line to symbolize that it is not really there, because knowledge is relation. It is nothing absolute. As is elsewhere said in the Kabbalah, both of them are contained and essentially involved in the result. And the will as wisdom or intellectual power and the capacity or faculty are really the father and mother of all that is, for to the creation of anything it was absolutely necessary that the infinite should form for himself and in himself an idea of what he willed to produce or create. And as there is no time for him To will was to create. To plan was to will and to create. And in the idea, the universe in potence, the universal succession of things was included. Thenceforward, all was merely evolution and development. Netzach and Hod, the seventh and eighth Sephirot, are usually called in the Kabbalah victory and glory. Netzach is the perfect success, which with the deity to whom the future is present attends, and to his creatures is a result from the plan of equilibrium everywhere adopted. It is the reconciliation of light and darkness, good and evil, free will and necessity, God's omnipotence and man's liberty, and the harmonious issue and result of all, without which the universe would be a failure. It is the inherent perfection manifested in an idea of the universe, and in all the departments or worlds, spiritual, mental, or material, of that universe. But it is that perfection regarded as the successful result which it both causes or produces, and is the perfection of the plan being its success. It is the prevailing of wisdom over accident, and it, in turn, both produces and is the glory and laudation of the great infinite contriver, whose plan is thus successful and victorious. From these two, which are one, from excellence and perfection of the divine nature and wisdom, considered as success and glory, as the opposites of failure and mortification, results what the Kabbalah, styling it yesod, foundation, basis, or illusion, characterizes as the generative member of the symbolical human figure by which the 10 Sephirot are represented. And from this flows Malkut, the empire, dominion, or rule. Yesod is the stability and permanence, which would, in ordinary language, be said to result from the perfection of the idea or intellectual universal, out of which all particulars are evolved, from the success of that scheme and the consequent glory or self-satisfaction of the deity, but which stability and permanence, that perfection, success and glory really is, since the deity, infinitely wise, and to whom the past, present, and future were and always will be one, now, and all space one here, but had to await the operation and evolution of his plan, as men do the result of an experiment, in order to see if it would succeed, and so to determine whether it should stand and be stable and permanent, or fall and be temporary. Its perfection was its success, his glory its permanence and stability, and the attributes of permanence and stability belong, like the others, to the universe, material, mental, spiritual, and real, because as they belong to the infinite itself. This stability and permanence causes continuance and generation, and generates succession. It is perpetuity and continuity without solution. And by this continuous succession, whereby out of death comes new life, out of dissolution and resolution comes reconstruction, necessity and fatality result as a consequence, that is to say, the absolute control and dominion of the infinite deity over all that he produces, and over chance and accident, and the absolute non-existence in the universe, in time and in space, of any other powers or influences than those which, proceeding from him, are and cannot be perfectly submissive to his will. This results, humanly speaking, but in reality, the perfection of the plan, which is its success, his glory, and its stability. It's also his absolute autocracy, and the utter absence of chance, accident, or antagonism. And as the infinite wisdom or absolute reason rules in the divine nature itself, so also it does in its emanations and in the worlds or systems of spirit, soul, and matter, in each of which there is little chance or accident or unreasoning fate, as is the divine nature unmanifested. And so this is an area where I kind of run into some complications in a sense, because I do kind of intuitively feel that there's not a grain of sand in the universe that is out of place, but I also know with something approaching certainty that, man, how have we already got 40 minutes into this? That's crazy. With nearly absolute certainty that the universe is partly and largely the result of the interplay of antinomies, of opposites, of male and female, and dark and light, hot and cold, and chaos and order. And so how can it be that there is no accident, there is no grain of sand out of place in the universe if there is no chaos? How can there even be free will if everything is constrained by the absolute rule of an autocratic deity? And the answer is found in relativity. It all depends on the vantage point from which you are viewing any occasion or instance, and from the viewpoint of the totality or the from the viewpoint of the all, it is one coherent whole operating in complete harmony and perfection. But from the point of view of a person who was just killed in a drive-by shooting, it is an accident of chaos that this person was killed. And there is, of course, chaos in the relative sense that we experience it. And so just as we have to compartmentalize in our daily lives in order to be human, in order to, not realize, for example, that sex is so completely irrational that we cease to respond to any of the input that would normally cause arousal, because we realize that we're just looking at meat and fat and bone. Or, we have to be able to compartmentalize in order to play out our role of being human. And so in order to understand how everything that can be spoken of in this reality is true and false, that all of these things are true and false, and it is both true and false to say that they are true and false, that it is just a matter of perspective and relativity, how these things are to be interpreted. And so it's a very tricky exercise in intellection, but hopefully I've demonstrated that it actually can be accomplished. And it's kind of one of the greatest manifestations of arrogance that so many people in the past have decided that there are limitations to the extent of our knowledge, and that they already know where those limitations are and how to define them. Because if that was true, I don't think we would exist anymore. And what we're doing, I think, in this series of live streams, at least on occasion, is finding ways to map and articulate what previously may have been considered unknowable. And then what we have to do is find ways to express that in other formats, because for a lot of the people that need to understand these things, a direct verbal communication would not suffice. But there may be ways to communicate symbolically directly to the subconscious and actually impart this knowledge to them. This is why the language of symbolism in the occult is so incredibly powerful and important, and also the ability to tune into the intuition and to create a bridge between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind, so that we might discover that symbolic language that allows us to communicate on these much deeper and more profound levels. And so on that note, we are going to wrap up this secret stream, and we will continue again. I may do an extra one this week to make up for the one that we missed last week, but I am going to go eat some mushrooms now, and we'll see you guys again very soon. Thank you so much for your support, as usual. Yep. And remember, we do have community bulletins. So if you guys have any suggestions for, what it is that we should get into once we're done with the 28th degree, we could just continue with other degrees of Freemasonry. We could get into all sorts of other subjects as well. So just let me know what you guys are interested in. And if I feel qualified to talk about it, then we will dive into some of those other interests that you guys have. So thank you so much for spending this time with me, and I will see you again very soon.